Greetings, my name is Mr.Bonesworths, and for this video I'm going to be showing off my current anti-exhaustion perk build while using my main, the Doctor. Now, in all reality, this build can work on pretty much any killer, but I chose Doctor for a few niche qualities that he has, and I'm very comfortable with him. And secondly, I want to know if there's a certain perk in play that prevents screaming. And the only two killers that can really get survivors yelping is Clown and, well, my boy. Now, the goals for this build is one, clearly to exhaust survivors, but also to make use of these two perks, which have been called awful, useless, should not run, very unrecommended. But I find these two together to be quite disruptive, and honestly, a bit of a interesting combination. But I'll get to that. You might be asking, wait, why exhaustion? Why only focus on that? Well, the way I think about it is like a game of rock, paper, scissors with the perks. You try to bring something to counter, beat, or be equal to against each side. But exhaustion perks are like rock, so why wouldn't you bring paper if you have a very high chance of rock being played? In simpler terms, when's the last time you went to a lobby that didn't have a pick that was counted by being exhausted, aka made for this and Iron Will, or cause exhaustion such as Life, Dead Hard, Sprint Burst, so on? Probably been a while. It's very rare. So, again, if you know they're gonna throw something as powerful as rock, it's last made for this, why wouldn't you try to counter it the best you could? Which brings me into another reason why I chose Doctor. Doctor relies on very precise timing sometimes, especially if you don't have his add-on, which decreases the detonation by 10, 20, 30%. Perks like Made for this can mess with that timing so much, and hell, if you want an example for Oculus, Clown's bottles don't become as effective. Wesker's Fully Infection does not become as powerful. Even when you go for a normal lunge, sometimes, and I've seen this from me, my friends, bigger streamers, when they go for a lunge, if they didn't have Made for this, they would have hit. And it's like muscle memory, you go for the swing that way. But because they have that extra speed boost, they whiff it. And it feels awful. So that's why I try my best with this build to try to eliminate that risk. Get my timings back on track. Lunges, everything. But let's go on to actually explain the build. For my add-ons, I recommend whatever you feel comfortable with. I used a bit of information and deception. I do actually recommend not using a discipline add-on for Doctor if you use him, because it can actually mess with one of the secondary effects of, well, Deathbound, and can make it so a stealth element I could have had got ruined because of happenstance. For our first perk, it's going to be Returner from last build for Legion, Fearmonger. Fearmonger gives this survivor blindness and exhaustion, while also stacking on top of their current effects if they have any. This lingers for 5 seconds. Now, the main reason to use this perk is simply not reward survivors to work on the main objective. If they're exhausted, they're going to stay exhausted while on the gen. This can also help with your first chase, possibly. If a survivor was working the gen and you're coming near, well, instead of using the sprint burst to get away or life, they have to now walk for 5 seconds or crouch, I guess. And then they'll be able to use it. This will sometimes be able to give you a free hit and a short chase. Up next, another return perk from Legion is Blood Echo. Now, with Made for this, survivors often feel comfortable being injured. But that changes their mind once this is in the equation. No longer do they get their picks values, and it becomes a bit harder to heal in the way of if you interrupt them, they lose all that progress. And it's a hefty amount you become exhausted for. 45 seconds is no laughing matter. And if they ever work on a gen while this was happening, it stacks. Very nice combination. Highly recommend it. Our third perk is Genetic Limits. Genetic Limits is a recently new perk that came in with the Singularity. And it causes the exhaustion effect for 32 seconds if you complete a healing action on yourself or another. Now this will happen to two people if they are healing the same person, which is pretty nice. However, the most side problem with this pick is you don't know when it's working, or who it's working on. It doesn't show a bar going down, hey, someone exhausted, or it doesn't reveal who completed the healing action. Like, let's say 3 people run to the unhook for some reason. Now, either 2 people can be exhausted, or a possibly weird option. They know this pick is in play, and the survivor that got unhooked has a medkit. The other 2 can heal the survivor to 99. Then, the person that got unhooked can then heal themselves, and they become exhausted. Because it doesn't affect the survivors unless they complete it. So if you interrupt it, well, tough luck. Now, they are still not exhausted, and they're gonna lead you on a chase for a while. This will lead to, like, a bit of a gambling situation with the pick, where you can try to figure out who could be affected by it. And if you start a chase and then the person uses the exhaustion pick, well, oh well, someone has to have it, right? If they complete the healing action. And if they're being useful, they're on a gen. So eventually get to it, but that's not as gratifying, right? You want to have chases that don't take as long. And you noticed I have no slowdown in this build. That's a 4 or 5 reason why I picked Doctor, because he has a bit of a built-in slowdown. It's not too massive, but it's something. Now, this is when Deathbound comes in, our 4th and final pick. Deathbound is a Pyramid Head perk, which activates whenever survivors are doing a healing action outside of your territories, or 32 meters, and whenever they finish or stop doing that healing action, and you're still far away, they scream, and if they move further than 8 meters away from the survivor they were healing, they become oblivious for the perk's duration, which is 60 seconds. And this can also affect 2 survivors. Now already you can see how this is feeling in the weakness of genetic limits. You now can hear who's being affected, and you can possibly even sneak up on them. Now, for an example, say that 2 survivors are running to Claudette who's on hook. They unhook it, you would chase someone like Lori on the other side of the map. Boom, you hear 2 screams. Nick Cage, Meg. While you're chasing Lori, then you see Nicolas Cage walking, oblivious as can be, away from Claudette. You break chase with Lori, because C's still going, C has made for this, and the game's pallets to work with, you're not catching it. You catch Nicolas Cage off guard, hit him. Boom. He tries running, goes for an unsafe pallet. Because he had life, he thought he was going to get away. Nope. If you down Nicolas Cage too quickly and walk away from Hook trying to set up another Deathbound, if the duration is not reached, which is 60 seconds, pretty long and decent if you want to try to go for a Meg as well, you can't reapply it. It's its cooldown. You get it for 60 seconds, but you can't use it again during that time. So it still has that weakness, and there's not really much you can do about it. But again, you can now keep track of a survivor that's exhausted and get a free hit. There are still two other weaknesses as well with these perks. For one, they still need to complete the heal in action. So let's say Nicolas Cage got off the heal for whatever reason. He screams, and he's only oblivious now. Well, at least you know that, hey, he was there near Hook, not being too useful, and that the Meg, when Z screams, is most likely exhausted. The other pretty bad weakness is Deathbound doesn't work if a survivor heals themselves. So if they have inner healing, they still get exhausted, but you don't know they are, which is, you could possibly think, hey, they healed inside my terror radius or 32 meters. Where are they? And it just kind of wears down a bit. And there is one perk that completely counters a lot of what Doctor does, and the screaming part of Deathbound, which is Calm Spirit, which has been seen an increase of usage ever since Ultimate Weapons implementation. And now, the only way you know that someone's being affected by Deathbound if they're outside your terror radius of 30 meters is that the bar will start going down. Like, you see the timer going. Now, that's not as noticeable as hearing Nick Cage or Meg scream. So if you're chasing Lori, you're probably not looking at these perks at the moment. You're focused on like getting your charges right, making so you don't get stunned by that pallet, so on and so forth. But I'm just saying this so you know the weaknesses. I find it's that mostly the positive happens when I play this game. The negatives are still there, and I sometimes run into them. But per match, oh boy, does these two become valuable assets. And hey, if they don't want to heal and not deal with genetic limits, there's the bigger penalty, which does more than just exhaust you, it hemorrhages you. And for the rare chance that survivors don't bring in exhaustion perks, again, you got the Oblivious and the Blindness status effect that could be in play. And hemorrhage is not the strongest, but it's still something. And as for it being a good or fun build, I've had mixed responses and thoughts about it. But one, it does its job well with exhaustion. It will definitely come into effect if they have exhaust perks. As for the fun aspect, I've had people not say anything, say that it's a different build and kept on monotones, and it's been called a noob build. Something that you use when you don't want to actually play the game right, which I found quite funny. Now, one thing I did try and mess around with was a perk called Septic Touch. Just replace Deathbound with it. But then I ran into the same problem as genetic limits, and I didn't fix this one. And oddly enough, if you actually search up Zosh, there's only 4 perks in the game that make it so survivors become exhausted. There is add-ons for killers, but we're not quite looking at those. The way I would describe Septic Touch is a bit of a fearmonger for healing. Instead of 5 seconds, it's 10 seconds. And it's applied while you're doing the heal, and a bit after. Which, if you are actually able, like, what I would recommend this is, yeah, use it on Doctor, increase your tear radius, and just watch them struggle a bit. And if they do I heal an accident and then go on to fearmonger. I guess this is a funny way for them to stack even on top of each other. So if you had them do static touch like a heal and accident, then go on fearmonger, boom, 15 seconds of each. And then if one of them was already injured still, say the one that did the heal and accident because they had made for this for some reason, like what happens, you add 15 seconds onto that 45, I believe. I could be wrong though. I haven't used septic touch enough because I tried it and it was like, this does nothing. But I think it could be useful. If there's any other questions or perhaps ideas, I'll look into the comments and try to answer or work with responses, but I'm very tired at the moment. And I'll see you all on the flip side. We